Quick question. When was the last time running your childcare program actually felt sustainable? Not just surviving, not just getting through the week, sustainable. Welcome to Childcare Conversations. We're hosting a 2-day virtual summit called Building Profitable Childcare Programs Without Burnout or Bailouts, happening February 24th and 25th. This summit is for owners, directors, and early learning leaders who are done carrying everything alone and ready to build programs with strong leadership, solid systems, and real financial stability. Over the next several episodes, you'll hear the kind conversations you'll experience at the summit. Practical, honest, and grounded in real-world leadership. To learn more and register, head to childcareconversations.com and click the summit registration link. Let's dive in. Welcome to Childcare Conversations with Kate and Carrie.
Building profitable childcare centers without bailout and without burnout. Carrie, why do we need to get owners to stop bailing out their programs?
Because we want them to not bankrupt themselves. I mean, I did that. I definitely put in money that should have been spent elsewhere in my life, and I put it into the center or centers at various times. But I think part of the issue is, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, and so, this is a squeaky wheel for me, but this whole discomfort with letting people fail and learn from that and move forward. Like, failure that you learn from is not failure. It's the first 52 times a kid tried to crawl, right? They tried and they tried and they didn't get anywhere. And then they fell down and then they went backwards. And, all of that happened. And people are like, cool, once you learn how to walk, we're not letting you fail anymore. And, yeah, I get that it's different when it's your money on the line than when it's somebody walking, but people can't learn if they don't have any stress. Like, you learn through the stress. And your school is going to go through stress periods where enrollment is down, and you have to work with your team, not come in and swing in on a vine like Tarzan and magically make everything better and then swing back out. You've got to work with the team.
It's really hard. And you and I have a couple of clients like this who have more than one business. And, as a household or as a person, money is not really an object. And so sometimes we get that director or even the staff who are like, well, why does it matter that we're down 15 kids? You've got plenty of money to handle the bank accounts. And so that's exactly what happens, right? The owner comes in and figures out the budget instead of making the hard calls with staff, teaching the staff, maybe even teaching the leadership what it means to, staff based on ratios perhaps versus staffing because you like everybody and because everybody wants their full-time hours. And so hopefully during the next, 15 minutes or so, Carrie and I will kind of have this conversation. And if you're an owner listening to this, we're not telling you that you can't. Hopefully we will get you to think about maybe come up with some other ways. One of the biggest ways is that vocabulary piece. And that also goes both ways. Your vocabulary, how you come dressed, how you present yourself. So if you are coming in always talking about new trips or new this or new that, and meanwhile, in the next breath, you're telling your staff they have to, trim the budget or whatever, there's a disconnect in your staff's head.
I don't think there's a disconnect. I think that they're like, to heck with you. You go to the Bahamas. I'm not sending anybody home early because our ratios are down. If you can afford a trip to the Bahamas, you can afford to pay this person for the entire amount of time they were scheduled.
Well, I do think it's a disconnect. I think it's a disconnect because I think your staff, your leadership need to understand a business budget, and what it means to break even and cover your costs.
Yes, but because you haven't communicated that, and
Right.
because there's this thought that if the owner or if the board can afford nice things, then it's not a big deal if we're having a financial hard time. So we see this a lot of times with our programs that are in nonprofits, that are in churches and stuff like that. And they're like, you just had a capital campaign. You can't tell me that we can't afford to have Susie work her whole 35 hours this week. You just did a capital campaign and you put it out in the newspaper that you raised $8 million. If you raised $8 million, Susie can work the 35 hours. But the fact that the church has the 35, the whatever million I said, is different than the childcare that may be its own separate nonprofit, that church, or that is a mission of the church. And if it keeps being a huge drain on the finances, they're going to set up a soup kitchen and close down the childcare center.
That's why, like, so today our goal is to have this conversation about the owner and the director disconnect, specifically about building profit. And sometimes I think profit comes out as almost a dirty word. I think that, and we've run into this a lot with directors who do what I joke and call and back of the envelope math, right? So they like do a head count and they know what your published tuition is on your website, and boom, they think they know how many, how much money you're bringing in and how big your bank account must be. But, let's talk realism, Carrie. You were an owner. You had 4 locations.
Yeah.
You know, when you had 100, let's just go, we're making numbers easy. 100 kids, even if the published rate was $500, was all 100 kids paying $100?
Absolutely not, because I had discounts for my employees. And then, of course, I had subsidy kids. And depending on the campus, I also had some discounts for large employers in the area or for multiple kids. So households that had 4 children, all 4 children did not pay full price, because I'm a compassionate human being. And I'm like, I had some of the highest rates. And so I knew it was more than a full-time income for most people to have 2 kids. And if you have 4, I'm going to give you some discount. And so, I would say, I don't know, it's probably not as high as 50% of the kids had some sort of discount, but it definitely felt that way some months.
Well, especially because there were times in your ownership cycle that staff even got free tuition.
Yeah.
And so my favorite though is when they look at that number. So they're like, oh, you got 100 kids. They all pay $500. Boom. They know how much money's coming in every month. But in reality, you might have 25% that are paying that full tuition. And then you've got all these other rates from 0, if you give free tuition to your staff, to maybe 90% of the published rate. Like, so maybe you do a 10% discount on each child in a family, right? So we've got owners who aren't clear because they think, well, I'm the only one that handles the finances, but that profit determines so much. I mean, Carrie, how many things do you determine as an owner based on profit?
I mean, pretty much everything. Whether we can take on an additional school because we have a waiting list that is 3 years long, and whether, because obviously there's a need and people like our care.
Okay, but as a director, I don't care if you open another school. I want to know what's it mean to my school today.
I mean, yeah, they do, because they're tired of getting phone calls from the people on the waiting list. But also it determines whether we can replace the equipment on the playground. It depends on whether we can hire another member of the admin team. So it's not just the director doing it. It's the director and assistant director. And maybe you can have a curriculum coordinator or an enrollment specialist, right? Who does all of the dealing with the parents and the people on the waiting list. Or can I bring on somebody who's doing Spanish language classes with the kids, and they come in and they do an hour in each of our classrooms every week? Or can I replace equipment? Or I always talk about googly eyes, but you can have a supply of googly eyes and you can have all the yarn you want. When the
What
school
about staff pay raises? Does that
Oh, you
determine?
wanna give staff pay raises? Oh, okay. If I have the money in the budget, we can do that. And if I don't have the money in the budget because 50% of the kids are coming at a discount, then I can't afford to give much in the way of raises. I might be able to give inflation-based raises, but I can't give any more than that
But even that is,
because
it's even not just this, it's not so much the budget, right? Because it could be in the budget, but did it actually come in the door?
right, the cash flow. Yeah, it depends on what's in the cash flow. And I think I've had several directors who had the feeling that if somebody was scheduled for 35 hours, that they needed to give that person 35 hours every week, even if that person came in 2 hours late one day because their car wouldn't start, they would help them make up those 2 hours. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. They didn't come in for 2 hours. They're at 33 hours if I need them that entire 33 hours. And I can hear in my inner ear the people going, "Ah, well, but that's what we contracted." Okay, Texas is an at-will state and contracts are baloney and I didn't do them. But even if you had a contract, it says up to that number of hours.
But it's also you asked them, kind of. You told them when they were supposed to be there and they chose not to be there.
Right.
And
But
but that's, I mean, that has to be, I mean, on both ends, right? Because when you get that, you also can turn that around to because we know this happens, because we had it happen, where we would have folks who everybody clocked in a couple of minutes early, like 10 or 15 minutes early, and everybody chit chatted at the end of their shift and therefore clocked out of their shift. And I know that this is, I mean, I got to be careful. I'm going to watch the clock on you, because if I'm not careful, you're going to get into a soapbox on theft, because that's exactly what it was. If
yeah,
I didn't tell you to clock, like I tell everybody, you need to be clocking in 10 to 15 minutes before your shift starts. That's not 30 minutes. And it's not 30 minutes afterwards because you were talking to your buddy. And so if I've got you scheduled for 40 hours a week, and now all of a sudden you've got an hour a day in additional time, it comes out as overtime.
yeah. And I think the issue is, how do owners and directors talk about this? It's that making sure we have the same language. So if profit is a word that makes your director's eyeball twitch, then don't use that term. Say budget, or say we do not have the money to give the raises we want unless. And so make it an if then statement. If we can keep expenses to here and revenue here, enrollment here, then we can afford to give raises at this rate, or we can afford to do $3,000 worth of updates to the playground outside of the new fall surface, right? It's that whole giving people that if then, I think, works really well if, again, that whole profit word is making people's eyeballs twitch. Find
But
ways to talk about it.
absolutely. So if you aren't sure how to talk about it, I mean, when's the last time you had fun at a staff meeting? So even if you don't use real numbers, even if you just pulled out board games, pull out the board game Life, pull out the board game Monopoly, and just play for a while. And then after everybody's had a chance to play one or both of those games, start talking about even things like, okay, so currently in the last month or so, you've been exposed to probably some, I don't know, maybe ice or bad weather if you are in the South. And so as a result, you might have been closed 1, 2, or 3 days, maybe even a whole week. If you're closed for a whole week, the parents aren't planning to pay you. If you're closed for a whole week, subsidy is not necessarily going to pay you in most states. So all of a sudden, you have a week where you have no income. But Carrie, is your bank going to let you not pay your mortgage for that week?
No, the
What about
utilities we're going to keep having to pay. The staff are going to want to be paid. all of those expenses continue. And if you have a well-written handbook, the parents will be paying as well. And you can decide to give them a discount, but that's entirely on really the owner. Like that is not a director
And
decision.
so that's an owner risk. So
Right.
those are the that's why I'm saying, like, to me, that's one of that, like, this is a perfect opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation or a one-on-three, an owner and leadership conversation, and just be really clear, because if you happen to lose power, that means you probably lost food. And that's an expense, right? If you had any damage, you have to get that fixed. That's an expense. And
And
so
where are where are those kids going to be while those rooms are being repaired? Because you can't just do it on the weekend. I mean, if you had a pipe burst in the ceiling, then you have to take down the ceiling tiles or the ceiling. You have to repair that. And if I have to hire people over the weekend, they're going to charge me time and a half if I can even get them. And it's probably more than a 2-day job because we've also got to dry out the whole building or the rooms that were affected. So I now have to rent a portable or move those kids into, maybe you have a multipurpose room. If you do, that's great. But a lot of programs don't have a multipurpose room. So where does that classroom full of kids go?
well,
I have to rent
unfortunately,
room from the church down the road or
or
the,
you're like a lot of our other programs, you probably had extra space. And so now you're trying to figure out, but you've got teachers. Now you got too many teachers.
yep.
You got ratios that are at maybe state minimum standards, but your staff are a little grumpy about it, right? Like, there's all kinds of things that happen, but situations like this are the perfect time to have these open dialogues with your staff and to help them understand, yes, we had this. And so, I want to continue to pay everybody, but here's what I need everybody to do. Over the course of the next month, when I'm bringing in tours and I want to fill the last four seats because my expenses the month before were double expected, you guys need to be really welcoming. You need to be like, oh, we love it here. Please come join our program. And I think even if people just play basic Monopoly in basic life, they see how things can happen and your income can change.
Yeah, I think that explaining the risk profile, not everything in the risk profile, but that you have issues of natural disasters, changes in the economy, air conditioners going out in the middle of the summer, heating going out in the middle of the winter, all those kinds of things, and that there has to be money saved away for those things. And if they say, but you and your spouse have plenty of money, that is our money for our retirement. That is not the school's money. The school has to handle its own money, just like you're, I guess I'm a mom. And so the conversation of, I may have plenty of money, but if you're a grown adult who, you know, came from my household, my money is not your money. So it's the same thing. The business's money is not the owner's money. It is the business's money. And your 20 something kid can't expect to be able to have everything they had when they lived at home and they were using your money. They have
You
to
know,
figure that out.
I think that's a great example, especially again, if we're thinking about this scenario, especially if there were schools that were closed, because chances are if you've got staff, some of those staff probably had relatives, significant others, children, somebody who was working who didn't get paid because of the ice storm.
Yeah.
And I think just kind of pulling it back to them, go, hey, did you and your significant other or your household, did everybody in your household make all their money this past week? Oh no, my husband is getting called into work and he gets paid hourly. Okay. And did your electricity maybe even be a little higher this week? Yeah, it was higher. Okay. So how did you make up for that? Oh, well, he now knows he's got to go pick up an extra shift if he can. He's going to try to get some overtime. Okay, great. Same thing with the business, right? So the business now has to figure out how to work overtime. And that could be exactly what it does, right? Maybe all of a sudden we're going to have a whole bunch of spring break stuff that we hadn't originally planned to do.
Or maybe you guys are going to have some evening and weekend care so that families that are having to deal with remodeling, repair work on their houses because of damage, because of the storms, have a place for those kids to be. I think that's a way for you to have some overtime. Just notify your insurance and notify licensing before you add those. Okay. We're going to be safe. We're going to moderate our risk by making sure insurance and licensing know. But yes, if they're saying, yeah, we've got some people in our lives that are now working overtime, go, great. So the school is now going to work overtime. Let's brainstorm. And again, let other people give you ideas for how to brainstorm, for how to work overtime. This does not all have to be the director. It doesn't all have to be the owner. It can be the whole team or all of the leadership team. And like, if your team is 100 people, maybe not the whole team, but at least the leadership team.
And it should be. I mean, this is how you get buy-in, and it's also how you get resentment. If you haven't had this conversation with the leadership team and the staff, and all of a sudden everybody's being told they now have to work one weekend a month for the next 2 months, they're going to be a little grumpy because they don't understand why all of a sudden you're open on Saturdays. You've never been open before on Saturdays before. Why are we opening 1 or 2 evenings a week? We've never done that before. Does the community have the need? Does the business need the revenue, right? Both of those are so totally, totally true. All right. So this is just part of those difficult conversations that sometimes need to happen when you are aiming to have a profitable business. And so building a profitable childcare center is not a nasty word. Carrie, if people want to know more, what should they be doing?
Well, I was going to say it's a necessary thing. If we want this business to continue for the next 6 months, the next 6 years, the next 6 decades, you have to be profitable. If you're not profitable, you're not going to be around in 6 months. So that is very important. So Kate and I are hosting a profitable a
virtual summit.
A virtual summit that is live, a live virtual summit. We do have some special recorded guests that are available if you are doing our VIP program. So some people couldn't make it live, and so they've recorded stuff, and the only way you can get those, and that's, I'm just going to give one secret away. Okay.
Nope.
No secrets. Okay.
No secrets.
You have to go to the page. If you're listening to this later, I'm sorry you missed this summit. There will be other summits, but we think it's important to occasionally get together and bring experts from around the field together in something that you don't have to spend $2,000 to go to, because the conferences are great, but sometimes we need something where we can do it in our program and we don't have to go anywhere. Or at your house, if you're, at your house or at your program. So we're doing a virtual summit. We're bringing in experts from all over the industry, and we will be doing this at least once a year. If there are more needs, because there's a lot of chaos, like there was at the end of last year and beginning of this year with all the storms and all the other things, then we'll probably do them more often, but at least once a year.
All right. So if you are listening to our podcast and you are new to our podcast, thank you for joining Kate and Carrie at Childcare Conversations. Go to our website, childcareconversations.com, and click subscribe to our newsletter. It's a little pop-up. And when you subscribe to our newsletter, you get emails from us twice a week, because if you didn't know, we do drop episodes twice a week. And we look forward to seeing you in a couple of days.
Thanks for tuning in. We love bringing you real talk and fresh insight from the world of early childhood education. Be sure to follow us on social media to stay connected and catch all of the latest episodes. And if you're planning a conference, training, or special event, Kate and Carrie would love to speak to your audience. You can learn more about their keynote sessions and workshops at kateandcarrie.com. If you learned something today, share the show and leave us a review below. We'll see you next time on Childcare Conversations.